And this evening in Florida, Donald Trump's favorite federal judge, who he appointed, Aileen Mercedes Cannon, denied Donald Trump's request to dismiss the federal criminal case against him for violations of the Espionage Act and illegal possession of classified documents. Judge Cannon wrote that the charges in Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's indictment of Donald Trump are, quote, either permitted by law, raise evidentiary challenges not appropriate for disposition at this juncture, and or do not require dismissal, even if technically deficient, so long as the jury is instructed appropriately and presented with adequate verdict forms as to each defendant's alleged conduct. Judge Cannon did grant the Trump request to strike one paragraph of the indictment about Donald Trump's alleged meeting with a representative of his political action committee, believed to be his campaign advisor, Susie Wiles, at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey in 2021. The indictment says that Donald Trump showed that person a classified map at that time. Judge Cannon said that because showing that map is not one of the charged crimes in the indictment, it is, quote, not appropriate, her phrase, not appropriate, to include it in the indictment. And in the ongoing scandal that is the United States Supreme Court, now there are tapes, thanks to Lauren Windsor, who was interviewed by Joy Reid earlier this evening. Lauren Windsor is a progressive activist who is known to approach important Republican people, pretending to be an ally, making flattering comments, and then secretly recording their responses. She is a dues-paying member of the Supreme Court Historical Society, which has corrupted itself into an organization that allows right-wing Supreme Court influencers to comfortably influence right-wing Supreme Court justices at the annual dinner of that organization. Last year, at the Supreme Court Historical Society's annual dinner, Lauren Windsor made recordings of her chats with Supreme Court justices that even she found so uninteresting, she did not publish them. This year was different. She got Samuel Alito to agree on tape to the goal of returning the country to, quote, a place of godliness.
As a Catholic and as someone who really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of winning.
I think you're probably right. I think one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. Really can't be compromised. So it's not like we're going to split the difference.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that the solution really is winning the moral argument. People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
And by contrast, Chief Justice Roberts responded very differently.
But you don't think there's a role for the court in guiding us toward a more moral path?
No, I think the role for the court is deciding the cases. If I start, would you want me to be in charge of guiding us toward a more moral path? That's for the people we elect. That's not for lawyers.
Well, I guess I believe that the founders who are godly, we're Christians, and I think that we live in a Christian nation, and that our Supreme Court should be guiding us in that path.
Yeah, I don't know that we live in a Christian nation. I know a lot of Jewish and Muslim friends who would say maybe not. And it's not our job to do that. It's our job to decide the cases as best we can.
And since Samuel Alito made his wife very much a public figure by blaming her publicly for flying flags supportive of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol at their homes, you might expect Mrs. Alito to have little to say to strangers about flags. And you would be wrong.
But why do you think they're coming after you?
They are.
I mean, like the whole like appeal to have heaven flag was like bull.
Right, but that's, the other thing is the feminazis believe that he should control me.
Feminazi is a term coined by Rush Limbaugh, who died 3 years ago. Rush Limbaugh coined the term in the early 1990s when he was not just the center of right-wing media, he was the only real national right-wing media. Fox News had not even been invented yet. And so Samuel Alito's wife is quoting material from Rush Limbaugh that is over 30 years old. That's how long she's apparently been listening and taking direction from the likes of Rush Limbaugh.
You know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, please don't put up a flag. I said, I won't do it because I'm deferring to you. But when you are free of this nonsense, I'm putting it up and I'm going to send them a message every day. Maybe every week I'll be changing the flags. There'll be all kinds. I made a flag in my head. This is how I satisfy myself. I made a flag. It's white and it's yellow and orange flames around it. And in the middle is the word vergogna. Vergogna in Italian means shame.
Shame indeed. Joining us now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and former chief of the criminal division, the Eastern District of New York. He's an MSNBC legal analyst and co-author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Trump Indictments. Andrew, this is quite an interesting window of sound into the thinking of Samuel Alito and Chief Justice Roberts.
Well, the description from both of them couldn't be more striking in terms of where the country is. And, we are hearing from a man who is a principal architect for the reversal after 50 years of Roe versus Wade. His thinking is, in that decision is, I think, just as weak as his thinking that was shown in the letter he submitted trying to justify the flag incident. And you also have this dichotomy because you have the Chief Justice saying what is, of course, the correct thing to say. And we're on the eve of getting a decision on presidential immunity, and it is a real sort of blot on this country and the judicial system. I hate to be so direct that you have Justice Alito and Justice Thomas sitting on those decisions. That is not the way the country is supposed to be operated. It's not the way the court is supposed to be operating. And their conduct, as reflected on these tapes, but their conduct in many ways, even without these tapes, is something that is really besmirching, a really important branch of government in this country that we are entitled to count on. And it's very hard to have faith in the system when you have that kind of conduct and these kinds of tape recordings coming out.
Wyoming in the 1940s.
Wonderful Wyoming, state of promise, land of far horizons.
Horizons, promise, also pigeons. Lots and lots of pigeons.
There was a serious infestation of pigeons.
That's Roger McDaniel, a Wyoming historian and author. He also served in both houses of the Wyoming state legislature. And the pigeon infestation he's talking about was at his old workplace at the Wyoming State Capitol.
That is the start of season 2 of Rachel Maddow Presents Ultra, the podcast in which Rachel once again introduces us to a U.S. senator I have never heard of.
Lester Hunt is the man who climbed out on the window ledges at the state capitol to drop poison to kill the pigeons. Lester Hunt, when he did this, was the newly elected governor of the state of Wyoming.
It gives me pleasure to introduce to you at this time the Honorable Lester Hunt, Governor of Wyoming.
He set his sights on the U.S. Senate, and he won that race too.
Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Lester C. Hunt, United States Senator from Wyoming.
The most popular politician in his state. Lester Hunt, newly elected a U.S. Senator, he heads to Washington to do what he has always done, to advocate for his constituents, for the people of Wyoming, also now to try to do some good for the whole rest of the country through service in the United States Senate. He is as poised as anyone could be for success in that job. But things are about to change for him, radically. What he is about to encounter in Washington will cost him his life. He will not live to see the end of even one term as U.S. Senator.
Joining us now is Rachel Maddow. You can get the first episode of Ultra's second season now everywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe to MSNBC Premium on the Apple Podcast app to get every new episode early and ad-free. Rachel, I can't take it. Listen, we got 10 minutes. It's just us. Tell me all the rest of it right now. I can't wait for the next episode. Just go. So then what happens?
Well, I mean, and then there's us at the end of it, like it becomes the America that we know. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. Thank you so much for letting me come on your show to talk about it and for listening to it and for liking it. Lester Hunt is, I mean, he's not a completely forgotten figure, but things went so badly for him very quickly after he got to Washington that what I was sort of trying to do in episode 1 is create, I think, the sense of the lost possibility. Like, he really did lose his life to this scandal that I'm writing about and working on in this podcast. And it's a huge loss for the country because he did have a long, bright future ahead of him if everything else in his life leading up to that moment was anything to go by. And I sort of feel like I've become really good at resurrecting old villains who we had forgotten about from history. But Lester Hunt is one of the good guys who we need to kind of unearth and remember his legacy too. And the loss of him to something that went really wrong with extremism in American politics is something that we should regret and remember and commemorate.
Yeah, so he's a Democrat getting elected in Republican Wyoming. Difficult thing to do, and impressive no matter when you hear that. He's kind of the John Tester of his time there in that situation. But apparently very naive when he gets to Washington in such a way, and I'm speaking beyond what I know. Because all I know is episode 1, but clearly he gets eaten up by Washington, and so this is a drama about more than him, though.
So there's this, what happens with him, and you'll get there very quickly in the next couple of episodes, is that he is confronted in the Senate with the first major thing he does in the Senate. There is another senator who is in the opposite party, who is kind of his opposite number, and this other senator gets involved in a Nazi propaganda campaign. A foreign influence operation, which is an absolutely outrageous, like dirty, false conspiracy theory tale that is designed to hurt the United States. And Lester Hunt realizes what this other senator is doing. He's absolutely repulsed by it. And they come to loggerheads in the Senate over this thing that this other senator is trying to advance. And part of the reason that I wanted to do this story was learning that while that is happening, while they are becoming mortal enemies in the United States Senate, they also live next door to one another. And their backyards back up onto each other's houses. And while they have decided they are out to destroy each other, they can see how the other one of them, how each other are living. And that only ratchets up the revulsion that Lester Hunt has for this other senator. And he just decides, you know what, I'm just going to take the political risk. I've got to stand up against a monster like this. And he does. And it's for the good of the country. And it costs him his life. But what he is fighting for, and the reason he is fighting against that foreign influence operation in Washington, and what, like, the low down dirty depths that some people were willing to go for political gain is an inspiration to me, even though it cost him his life.
So the first season of Ultra taught us about the pull that fascism had in the United States, the attraction that it had for some people, how far they were willing to go to advance the cause of fascism here. This takes us, and that's pre-World War II and into World War II, that story. And this takes us to a period after World War II, where it hasn't, you make the point that those people, most of them tended to disappear after Pearl Harbor, but that didn't mean they stopped thinking what they were thinking.
And it also didn't mean they went away in politics. I mean, one of the things that you and I talked about a lot with Ultra Season 1 was that became kind of a forgotten story. The Great Sedition Trial, all the Americans who sort of worked with a Nazi agent, who sided with the Nazis, who wanted the Nazis to win World War II, they were defeated in the United States one way or another. And that means that we forgot their stories. And it means we forgot their stories pretty quickly. And so when they were all kind of let go and didn't have to, they didn't get prosecuted for it, they weren't successfully prosecuted for it, or, in the case of members of Congress, none of them were prosecuted at all. Their story was mostly forgotten, and those of them that stayed in public life kept being the same kind of people they were before. And so, for example, one of the characters in Ultra Season 2 is a guy who was part of the Silver Shirts and linked to the German-American Bund and was writing for Father Charles Coughlin's publication. Those were all entities that we learned about in Ultra Season 1. In Ultra Season 2, he ends up being the subject of an international years-long manhunt by the United States government as what they believe him to be not just an American fascist, but an American fascist and a traitor and possibly a nuclear terrorist. So this stuff just gets worse when these people get away. And he ends up involved with a Republican senator. Who's a sitting senator in the United States Senate. So when you let these folks go away, get away with things, it's important that you at least keep tabs on them to see where else they're going to turn up, because it's never good.
So how many episodes, Rachel?
8.
8. Okay. And those of us who want, say, 16 or 24, is there any, what do we do? But so you tell stories in your show that are similar to this. They tend to be in the 20 to 25 minute range, something like that. Each podcast episode is significantly longer than that. What is the difference for you as a storyteller in the way you approach the podcast as opposed to the way you approach the show?
Very good question. So the podcast is basically, it's a little book, right? It's a TV show. Like if you think about it that, like it's, if you put all the episode lengths together, it ends up being something that I want to be able to hold your attention for about 4 or 5 hours. And so in order to hold your attention for that time, it has to be well told. We use a lot of archival audio, a lot of historical audio, finding the Wyoming audio archives to get the sound of Lester Hunt's voice was an incredible odyssey and super fun. But the idea is that this is a single story arc that can't be told in the course of a TV show. You need to stick with it for an 8-episode arc, but by the time you get to the end of it, you should have learned a whole new thing about American history and hopefully be sort of propelled along the way by the dramatic interest in it so that it sticks. I want these stories to be memorable. Like I'm not just interested in these stories because they're not well known. I'm interested in these stories because I think they should be well known. Like we should all remember Lester Hunt. We should remember that there was an internationally wanted American fascist fugitive who was involved with a Republican senator at the onset of the Cold War. Like, we should understand what happens when the Great Sedition Trial in the United States ends with all of those people getting away and all of those seditionist movements effectively getting away without ever being held criminally accountable for what they'd been charged with. I want those stories to be vernacular, to be part of the way that we think about our history as Americans in dealing with really strong anti-democratic challenges, because we have a strong anti-democratic challenge right now. So we should know what's kind of in our armamentarium of options for how to respond to it and what's worked well in the past and what hasn't.